Hi, I am Keith Greeno from AICPA Solutions, and today we wanted to present a webinar on helping solve research and development's biggest management issues. For the agenda, what we wanted to discuss is what are the biggest issues in research and development right now and how we can solve them, the differences in between standard project management and research and development project management, and how these management systems can help with increased business insight and visibility into the projects, departments, and programs. The budgeting and planning also into exactly the same thing, the project, departments, and the programs. And then spend management and purchasing workflow to control the spending, and that's by funding and restrictions as well as by the projects as well. We are going to be going through a brief demo of the Sage Intacct. We can do a more in-depth one later on if you're interested in a little bit more information, and there will be questions at the end of the webinar. All right, so what are the biggest issues facing research and development organizations? And really it gets down to the complexity of research and development projects are more than standard projects. And so what we need is a system that's robust enough to be able to handle that kind of stuff. Also, effective project management sometimes is just completely missing out of these companies. I mean, what they're doing is they're allowing the scientists and others to just handle all of the quality assurance themselves, the research or risk management themselves, the change control and communication. And so what we want to do is just try to address that. Also, accountability is a big one where the managers and the project managers are not accountable for the total spending that's going on. And so we just need to make sure that we rein that in a little bit. Also, there needs to be clear and concise reporting for government, the funding agencies. You certainly have got grants, and some of the grants have got restrictions. And then, of course, you can have in some of the corporation tax credits coming out of the federal government. Also, the upfront planning, and so lots of the organizations do not have any upfront planning inside of these R&D organizations, and that can cause lots of heartaches as well. And so how do we address that? And so the other thing being is that, and then the performance baseline. So how do we judge whether someone is doing, good or not good with regards to these R&D projects? Really, I guess if you get into it, it's a little bit of a catch-22. Because what we're trying to do is balance the creativity in the R&D for the scientists and everyone, and balance that with the control so that we don't have just crazy spending without actually having some results coming out the other end. And then the last one is develop and implement sound procedures for procurement acquisitions to be able to have spend management so we know exactly what we're spending on, and there is approval processes going through to make that happen. So let's just go on for that and let's talk about standard project workflow. And so if you look at it, it's a fairly simple thing as far as standard projects. I mean, if you think about it from a construction point of view, I mean, all you've got, you've got your plans, you build the foundation, then you build the walls, then you build the inside. And so it's kind of a step-by-step process. It's fairly simple. It can be complex in some issues, right? But really, here's our stuff. So we're initiating the particular process. We're doing the planning. Then we start executing, and then we're monitoring how we're doing. We end up closing the project when the building is done, and then we take a look and see whether there's any continuous improvement steps that we can do. But let's go one step further and take a look at it from the project management or R&D project management. And you can see that things get way more complex. And the reason for it is a couple things. Is that really at the beginning, think about it from these mRNA, vaccines when they were trying to build them. They had no idea what they were going to end up with. They had no idea what the actual costs were going to be. And so really what you're doing is you're bringing in a whole bunch of convergent information from the schedule, the costs, and research results from outside studies that are all combining together until you get to a baseline where we actually can say, hey, listen, we think we can actually build a vaccine out of this stuff, right? So understand what we have to do is combine this complexity into a system so that we're controlling the cost, because realistically down at the bottom here we're talking about the cost effectiveness of these program and expenditures are increasingly being called into question. Now, with that example I was saying with the mRNA vaccinations, I mean, I think I saw that that research scientist on the news the other day, and she said she'd been fired 4 times from different positions before she finally ended up with one that actually let her complete the project. So understand, it's something that has to be trade-off between cost controls and creativity to be able to bring these things to fruition. So let's go on a little bit further with that then. So how do we deal with that, with these existing systems and the current financial systems that are out there? And really what we can do is these systems can provide additional visibility with clear, concise reporting out of them. And how do they do that? And it's called dimensional reporting inside of the Sage Intacct solution that we are going to be demoing later on today. And so what it does is it allows you to have a very much simple chart of accounts. You don't need to have a ton of different accounts for all of this stuff. But what you're doing is you're doing dimensional accounting where you're actually by each one of the expense accounts, tagging it to a project or tagging it to a grant, tagging it to a department, and you could tag it to a project plus a department. And we'll show you what I mean by that. But it's really this combination of being able to have a simple definition for these dimensions and then being able to tag the accounts and the transactions to each one of these various dimensions that you want to track. And so what that does is it gives us the who, where, and what of all of this information. So let's just go a little bit further, and maybe this will become a little bit clearer. So let's just go into the dimensional analysis of the where side. So we're talking about the projects and grants, departments, and funds. And so if you look at this, what it is, this is a sample dashboard out of the Sage Intacct solution, right? And what we can do is we can configure it so that it's giving us a reporting based on all of the projects, right? And we can configure this any way we want. This is just one thing. But what it's doing is it's giving us what we call performance cards up on the top. You see, and it doesn't just have to have financial information. It can also have like hours or other things that you want to track. So this can all be inside of the system. So inside of here, we can take a look at it by the project, and you can see like you guys wouldn't have very much revenue being generated, but certainly the hours being charged, the labor cost, other expenses being charged, and whether it is over and above budget information can all be put into these systems for you, okay? So this is where we can break down this data and give it to you in a format for the where. Then we go one step further and we say, okay, listen, what else can we do from this visibility and being able to track this stuff? So if we've got grants and funds and restrictions on them, you see, I can also do this by just tagging it to this, restriction dimension or tagging it to a project dimension as well. What I can do is by each one of the grants, I can say, see, how much was originally rewarded? $600,000. Of which, $558,000 has actually been recorded into our revenue for the corporation or for the nonprofit, right? How much have we actually got remaining to draw on that? How many expenditures are related to it? It gives you all of that visibility so you know exactly where you are with each one of your grants so that you can do the reporting that you require for the government or for the funding agency, okay? All right, so let's go a little bit further on that. So see, in these dimensions, we can also do dimensional accounting, by vendor. I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to talk about it from a customer, but if you look at it from the vendor, you can see how much we're spending on each one of the vendors. And if you look at this, you're going, okay, this Magnolia CPAs, I think I want to be those guys because it looks like they've got a lot of money being spent on them. But understand, I can give you a breakdown by each one of these dimensions very, very easily, and those dimensions can be defined by the corporation when you're setting it up so that we can set it up however you need to have your information divided up. All right? So let's go a little bit further with regards to this on the insight and accountability and the visibility. And so on this insight, if you look at this, this is just a different dashboard, different view. These all can be built very, very easily inside of the system. But on this particular one, you see, so now we've got budgets and actuals. So we got that all with the actual numbers in here. I can, in the live, when I'm looking at the demo, you're going to be able to see that I can just click on this actual and it will drill right down into that detailed information. Or I can click on the budget information, it will drill straight down into the budget information on that. On top of that, you see, I can also look at it by the expense account. So if I'm in the administration side, how are our general and administration expenses doing? And how do they compare against the budget? On top of that, I can also break it down by departments or programs, right? So inside of your organizations, if you had one department manager, I can give them just the information about their particular budgets and all of the information about their department only. So you can see I can get all of this slicing and dicing happening inside this system, and this is real time. So if you think about it, the new accounting systems that are out there, the old accounting systems were transactions engines. Really, they were transaction engines that could do reporting. In these new systems, they are reporting engines that do transactions. And that is a big difference because all of the new information that's in these systems is all built for the reporting. The reporting is coming out of it all of the time. Okay? All right. Let's go into the next one. Let's take a look at another view on this stuff. So let's look at insights from your dashboard reporting, and now we're looking at it from the grant point of view and restrictions. And so you see, what we can do is we can do reporting on based on those dimensions that I was showing you, the grant revenue and the earnings and all of the information in any format that you need to be able to meet your reporting requirements that you have to have for your particular entities. All right? All right. So let's just go in a little bit further. So if we've got all of this insight into the information, because that can solve a bunch of the problems for us with regards to what those issues are for R&D companies, right? Because with your grants, you have to be able to track all of that stuff. But let's go into the budgeting. And this is a great, one I've got for Delbert. But, I didn't have any accurate numbers, so I just made this one up. And this tends to be the way it seems to be lots of times. And you look at it, and it's got lots of studies on why this is the case, but the bottom end is why do you want to bother with it? Well, why we want to bother is because if we're not planning, right, then we have no idea where the heck we're heading. There was an old saying, I think by Dwight Eisenhower, and I think it was for the D-Day, but all planning is essential, but all plans are ultimately useless. Because the bottom end with D-Day, things changed a whole lot, but because they did the planning up front, they were able to modify and change, as D-Day was going on. The weather came in and different things happened. And so how do we allow for that? And so understand, if we have a budgeting tool built into these systems that allow you to plan and analyze, forecast and report all in a collaborative type format, it is certainly going to help us. And so when I go into the demos and you're looking at some of these other, dashboards that I'm going to be showing you, you're going to see this budgeting in there and understand that it's built right into the system and we can give it to you very, very easily. All right, so let's just go on a little bit further. So on this one, now we're talking about the actual budgeting, right? Budgeting and planning, but this one is going into a little bit more detail just on the projects. And you see that I can divide the projects into multiple tasks underneath that. So how do you guys, sit down with your various research and development projects, right? And how do you break them down? Do you have different classifications for that? Because all you have to do is you set them up so that you can report on them in that particular fashion, and then you can see that it's easy to be able to budget on it at the same time. Now, if you go on to the particular reporting on here, you see the nice greens and reds in here. And all this is doing is inside of the reporting engine, in the Intacct reporting engine, it's got what they call conditional fields. And it's saying, listen, if this conditional field is 0 or above, then no problem, then put it in green. And if it's, below, this is actually looks like zeros are in the red. But if it's below where we want it to be, then highlight it for me so I can take a look at it and I can do something about the projects that are starting to go over budget, right? Now, we can go a little bit further on this as well, right? So understand, so I can do budgeting by the project, I can do budgeting by an expenditure, or I can do it any particular dimension that I want and be able to control that. If I want to go a little bit further, right, then I can compare budgets to actuals, and I can look at it, and I can have conditional reporting, which is going to highlight that for anybody that's getting this particular report, whether it's the management, whether it's the project manager, right? So we can certainly hold them accountable because they can say, hey, listen, I didn't know how much I was spending. Now you can sit down, give them the actual numbers, and show them exactly what they spent to date and say, hey, listen, the actuals is $38,000. You got $41,000 budget. You know, where the heck are you at? Because you seem to be spending a lot of money, right? On top of that, we can go a little bit further with the controls. And so on the next screen, we wanted to just talk about the procurement, right? And so with the procurement and purchasing controls, right? So this is built into the Sage Intacct solution. And so at each one of these steps between purchase requisition and purchase orders, I can have multiple approval steps. And you can define those. And so what's going to happen is that if you've got a research scientist that says, listen, I need a new gyroscope or something, right? So what's going to happen is the purchase requisition is going to come in, and then based on dollar amount or based on who the person is, it's going to route it to the particular approver for that. And then it will become a purchase order if it's approved, right? Even if you're in Tuck or anyway, what will happen is if you're the approver, you will get an email with this on it saying, by the way, with all of the attachments that are available for this purchase order, that for you to be able to approve and move it through this workflow. So what it does is it gives you way more control on purchase requisitions. People cannot just be generating a purchase order unless they've got the approval to do so. They cannot create a vendor invoice unless they've got the approval to do so. And this continues on in the actual payable side where you actually have the payments, and all the payment controls as well can be controlled and approved. Okay, make sense? Great. All right, so let's just go a little bit further because now we're talking about spend management. And you say, well, hold it, what are we talking about now? Because we have the budgeting and planning, right? So if we have budgeting and planning and we have a procurement control system, right? What the spend management does is it goes a little bit further, right? And so what it does is this, is that inside, if we go back on this other workflow, right? So on this other one, so what's happening is this, is that inside of this system, without spend management, then what's happening is it's relying on the approver to be able to say whether this thing is valid to move forward to the next step or not. Okay? With spend management, what it is doing, if you take a look at this, you see it's comparing what's going on in purchasing, what's going on in the accounts payable, what's in the general ledger as far as your budgeting totals, right? And it's comparing the budgeting in general ledger, budgeting in the purchasing, budgeting in the actual project itself, and it's saying, listen, if you are over budget, it's going to give you a warning. Or if you're over budget, it's going to stop you from being able to do it. So what the spend control is doing is that in real time, it's taking a look at what's going on inside of your system, and it'll flag the particular transaction. If this threshold is met, saying, listen, you're 10% over budget, therefore it's going to prevent it. If you're not 10% over, it's going to notify you to the administration that you've done this, and it will allow them to approve it and move it forward. So what the spend management does is it actually takes it up another level and allows you to give more control, so it will stop people from doing it without the approver actually having to go back and take a look. This actually notifies the approver that the thing is over budget and there's a problem. Okay? So this is going to certainly allow for more compliance with regards to your spending. So what else can we do with these systems? So understand, on top of that, we can also do what we call forecasting of positions, because inside of here, if we have all of the budgeting information, plus we have the current actual information, all the forecasting does is it basically takes your actual information, adds it to the budgets for the rest of the year, and then says, based on the actuals to date, plus the budgets for the rest of the year, here's what your actual forecast is going to be at the end of the year with your current spending that's in place. Okay? So lots of functionality that can give you visibility into what's going on with your operations. And so what we're trying to do, as I said, is solve those initial issues that we're talking about for research and development companies. So what I'd like to do then is just pause and let's go into the actual demo of the actual live accounting system itself, just so you can see how the ease of use is flowing through here. Okay? All right, so let's just jump over there. All right, so what I've done is I've logged in to a company, and this is a live hosted system, so this is on the web. So all you do is you're logging in. There is no installation of this system. Anybody with the access and credentials to be able to log in is able to log in here. It's all secured. The data is all maintained. It's always up to date. You never ever have to upgrade this program because it's doing that all of itself. Okay? All right, so let's just go through. So this is the Sage Intacct. And so if you're looking at it, you're saying, okay, what have I got? Well, the easiest way to be able to see all of your data is to build a dashboard for every individual that is going to have access into this system. So as a controller, you see I want to see the general and administration expenses and what direction. I've got these performance cards. This is the stuff that I consider important that I want to track. And you see that I put in here, how many dollars in grants received and how many open grants are available. So it can track financial and non-financial data out of this system. Okay? So we can have reports, we can have these performance cards that I just pointed out, and we can have graphs depending on how you want to look at your data. Okay? On top of that, these systems with a single login, if you do have multiple entities where you have to control them, it will allow you to maintain multiple entities at the same time as well. So I can move from one entity to the other by just clicking on it, and it will change what company I'm in. So single login, multiple entities with all of the reports, the graphs, and performance cards, however you want to see them. Okay? All right, let's talk navigation then. So inside of these systems, as I was saying, so what you've got is you've got the dashboard, which is usually the best place to be able to do most of your work every day. So you want to put everything that you're doing on a regular basis on your dashboard. Okay? On top of that, we can also go back to the old menu type systems. I mean, this is like your old accounting systems where you can go down and take a look at the purchasing, and you want to take a look at like this purchasing workflow that I was showing you before. All of that stuff is on here, right? So, and understand, this is all happening real time. Like this is actually a live company that's running off of the web that's in here. Our internet is not exactly as speedy as it could be, but you see I can move around, look at anything that I want to with the menu systems as well. Okay? On top of that, right, so we've got these purchasing workflows, we've got the menus that we can use, right? On top of that, we can also come into bookmarks because we are using a web browser type technology. So you can see if I wanted to go back to the controller workshop, I can just click on it with the bookmark, and it will change me right back to that same thing. All right? On top of that, there's also some other important information that you need to understand is that this system, you're saying, well, listen, I want to know what the heck is going on, or I don't know what's going on, and I really need some information about what's going on with purchasing, right? So if you happen to be in this purchasing workflow, right, and you're saying, hey, listen, what's this all about? The help and support is always available. So you come in here and go, hey, I need some help with this page, right? And so what it's going to do is it's going to bring it all up, and it's got all of it. So it's like having all of your manuals at your fingertips. So if you're in a particular field and you don't know what should be in there, you can click on the help, and it'll tell you what should be in that field. So what it's doing is it's trying to make and give you all of the access to all of the information all the time that you need. Okay? Make sense? Good. All right. So let's just take a look at a different dashboard then. So we've looked at a couple different things, right? So let's go into the dashboard for the CFO. And so now I'm changing over to a CFO, and the CFO wants to see things completely different. This, she happens to be way more graphical of nature, right? And so what is going to happen is there's going to be a much more graphical type presentation that's coming up for the and I apologize for this delay. It's our internet right now is just running a little bit slow, but because I've got a whole lot of stuff going on my machine. But you can see, so what I've done is I've gone into a dashboard now that's got way more graphical type format to it. I can now take a look at this information by different performance cards. I can take a look at the information with different dates. I can take a look at it by different companies. Again, it depends on what you've given them access to on what's going to be able to drill down and get into. Okay? So on top of that, let's go into a different type of dashboard. So again, what we want to do is take a look. Let's take a look at dimensional insights. And so from a dimensional insights, all we're doing is we're saying, listen, I want to be able to break it down. And this is all this dimensional accounting that I was talking about and how easy it is to change it. Now, this is looking at it with a graphical view, but it's dealing with more of the projects that we were talking about in a different format than we had before. Easy to set up. All I have to do if I wanted to maintain or change anything on here, all I have to do is go into the editing, and the system will go in and it'll opening up the editing format so I can go in and modify this report real time. Okay? Easy to use. But let's say I wanted to take a look at something that's going on in this service. So I can click on that, and as I said, I can drill down very, very easily into any of the transactions to see exactly what's going on. You know, you're looking at this $1,900 or $19,600 transaction. All I do is click on it, open it up, and what will happen is it's going to give me the actual detail of what happened and where all of that stuff got posted. And you can see that each transaction can be posted to various locations, various departments, and these are all these dimensions that I was talking about. Okay? But the other important stuff just to understand in here is every one of these transactions has a transaction history that comes with it. So everybody that originally did the entry, anybody that modified the entry, all of that is tracked inside of the system. And on top of that, it also has all of these attachments. And so you can attach your invoices straight down to each transaction, or you can attach your, let's say the particular purchase order that you wanted to do, and this is the item I wanted to purchase. All of that's there. It's embedded into the system so that you have it all the time at your fingertips for anybody to look at. Okay? So you can see all of this stuff is available anytime that you want. So let's just go back through to the other dashboard again for our controller and just take a quick peek at that again, because on top of that, you see, we can also drill into the various performance cards that we've got. Now, in this particular one, you see, we've got these open grants. And so where is that coming from? Now, understand, what I've got in the background is some other information about employee count, but it's another field, and all I did is made the change to it. But you can see I can come in here, and what it's going to do is it will take me to the information on where all of the employee count or this grants are coming from. So if I had an engine that's just keeping track of how many grants are available, this thing will keep track of it and go up or down depending on what I want to track. Okay? So lots of different views. So understand what we've got is this, as I said, it's a reporting engine, this Intacct type solution, and it also does the transactions. And so all of the transactions are underneath there. You're still taking care of all of your taxes just as you did in your old systems. But what this is doing is giving you the visibility to be able to see things from what the particular person needs to see. So if you are in charge of a bunch of researchers and here's the projects that you've got, you can see them all at your fingertips by being able to just go in here. You would have just your active projects on here, and here you can go into every one of them. You can see the bioavailability study or whatever's going on and how much has been spent, right? How many hours are on it? Again, it's not just tracking the financials, it's also tracking your quantity type information like hours worked or grants done. Okay? All right. So really that's as far as I wanted to go with the demo. I don't want to get into too much of the information, but one last thing I just wanted to show you just so you understand how easy the system is to configure and manipulate. And so inside of the controller dashboard, right, I can also have all of my approvals all coming in here. So if you have timesheet approvals, they would just show up in here, and all you'd have to do is click on them from the dashboard. As I said, if you're not on the system, it will send you an email with the approval steps so that you don't have to when you're on vacation. Hopefully you're going to forward that to somebody else for the approvals, right? But if you forgot to, you're still going to get it, and you can improve it from anywhere in the world. Timesheets, the journal entries, the purchasing, the expenses, so all different things that you can have in the system with the workflows to control your spending. Okay? So you can see what I'm able to do is I'm going to be able to get the visibility into what's going on with the projects. I can give my project managers visibility into what's going on with their projects. I can control the spending so that you're spending it on the correct things. We can keep it under control so that we know that it's being allocated to the correct project, so we don't have one particular project getting spent for something else, which is going to make the lives of all of the project managers much easier. The other one is we had one particular research and development company, and what they were doing is they were spending hours after the month end to be able to go back in and grab all of the information out of their accounting system, put it into Excel, and then do a financial report for the funding agency. And you can see as part of that, those graphics that I was showing you before, I can build that into this system, and all I'd have to do is just email it off to them, and they would have it every month without having to do anything, which can save hours and hours of time. All right? All right, from here, let's just go back into our presentation then and just continue on. And so what we've got is this, is that, so inside of our systems, really, what we've got is the visibility, the insights, and accountability that we can help solve. How do we do that? Because we can handle the complexity of an R&D project, right? Even though it's got multiple phases that are coming into that thing, we can break those down and be able to give you some place to be able to give you the reporting so that you can go back and see exactly what was spent and what was going on at the particular time, right? We can handle the effective project management with the quality management, the risk management, the change management. You can see that if there's changes in here, we've got multiple ways to be able to handle that change inside of the organization. The communications, you see, if there's going to be an overspending on something, those communications can automatically happen with our spend management, or we can have reporting that's automatically going to the government or the granting agencies, so that they've got it at their hands all the time. Therefore, we can hold our management and the project management accountable for the projects. They cannot say that they didn't know what was going on, because they can have it at their fingertips all the time. And so with that, they cannot say that they don't have the information, right? Also, the concise reporting for all stakeholders, whether it's government agencies, whether it's anyone, right? You can give them in their format anytime. Then on top, upfront planning. And so every project has got the capability of having all of that planning available to it. So therefore, you have to, as an organization, insist that it's happening, so that even though you may not be correct on that particular budget, at least there's something that you can go back and compare it to. And then being able to monitor that stuff with that, it's very easy. You saw in those particular process flows back a little bit in here where we're talking about the budgets. You see, I can come back and I can compare anything, whether it's in the project, whether it's in the expense. All of it is very easily done inside of that dimensional accounting. Okay? And then on the procurement monitoring and controls, again, so it's the controlling of unapproved overspending. And so we can't say that the project, by the way, it was $1 million project and all of a sudden we spent $1.2 million. We will not go over if we have the processes in place for the approvals, or we have spend management. So depending on how important it is for overspending, you can put in spend management. It will lock the door and you cannot do it without the approval, right? And then maintaining control over the funding expenditures. You may have, certain things that says, okay, listen, this particular expenditure only has to go for COVID research. Therefore, you cannot be spending it on other projects. It has to be for COVID research. So you may have particular projects with COVID research on them, and they would meet that restriction. Therefore, you can make sure that when you're tagging this transaction, it's meeting both of these criteria, and you can go back and report on it. And then that forecasting that we're there. But overall, really what we want to do is this. We want to maintain this balance in between creativity and control. As I was talking about before with regards to that mRNA, research scientists, we don't want to slow them down. You don't want to be, nickeling and diming them and saying, listen, we don't see any benefit out of it. But you do want to have an oversight to make sure that things aren't just getting crazy where the expenditures are just mounting up and you don't see any light at the end of that tunnel. Because we do want to balance in between creativity and control of these particular systems. So let's just talk. So what we're talking about is the Sage Intacct solution. And really what it is this, is it's what they call a best-in-class system. And so it's not really a suite of products. You know, you can have a number of different products being able to come in and talk to the Intacct solution. It is an open architecture which allows for the research and development tracking. It allows for donation and grant tracking. It allows for the budgeting and spend management. It allows for the payroll and human resource tracking. It allows for the government tracking and compliance. And so all of this stuff can be done underneath one umbrella, but it is not done in one system. But there's an integration in between the two where what you end up with is this best in breed. So the best budgeting and planning is what you got, not the one that comes with the system, but the best one that fits your particular organization. So we think that this really results in a much, much stronger project management system, and especially for research and development companies, you know, if with the government compliance, with all of the payroll, with everything all embedded into one system so that you can do your reporting for what you need, this is going to save you, and it has saved some of our research and development companies thousands of dollars. So at that, I would just like to leave it open to questions. But really what we're talking about is this, is that at AICPA, we believe in using technology and management best practices. We want to make you as effective as possible with all of your systems and make your organizations and businesses successful. And so that's our hope. And thank you very much for your time, and hope you enjoyed the presentation.